Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our November meeting of the Transportation Policy Leadership Group. My name is Herb Marlowe. Let me begin by reading a memorandum in the record from Commissioner Middle to Chairman Hagan. Chairman Hagan, please be advised that due to a family medical appointment scheduled on Wednesday, November 13, 2013, I will not be able to attend the Policy Group Leadership Workshop. Please read the reason for my absence into the records. Welcome to this workshop today. Today we start a shift. For the past months, you've heard from a number of groups and their perspectives on the community needs and what they'd like to see happen. Today we're going to start to shift to looking at empirical data and looking at solutions. And today we're going to focus primarily on what we call optimization strategies. Those are strategies which are designed to use the existing assets to the best that you can. And our rationale for that is that we need to document to the community that we're making the best use of the resources that you do have before you move on to additional resources. So we'll be making a number of presentations by members of the project management group, which are your technical staff that meets every Friday and works on preparing these agenda items. And so that will be our presentation for today. We have some other items we'll present in that, and as you see your agenda, we really have a number of things we're going to try to get through today. What I do want to stress is, what you'll be hearing today really represents the best professional judgment of the staff here. It does not represent years of empirical study, but it's from their professional experience as they present these ideas to you, and that's what we're trying to do. One of the issues that we have to work with is this is one of many projects which overlap. And how do these fit together? And as we do work with various groups, we try to explain that. And in the process, the staff have developed a graphic which we found very helpful to talk about the relationships between economic development, transportation, and land use. And so I'm going to ask Lucia Garces to come and present that to you first. So Lucia.
Thank you, everyone. In an effort to really understand what you're going through and then how it cascades to staff, what we tried to do is create a graphic that we think might help us as we move forward to really serve almost as wayfinding. You know, when you're at the theme park and the "you are here" gives you some context of where one might be. So if you just bear with me for a minute, I'm going to take you through 3 bubbles, ultimately ending up in a Venn diagram that might help us understand of how all these things that we're hearing come together. We're hearing comprehensive plan, we're hearing optimization projects, we will hear today about key economic spaces. How do they all make sense in what you're trying to do? So here's our initial try of what we're calling, how do we get to great places? And initially, there are a lot of items that are being discussed in the land use category. There's the comprehensive plan update that's underway. As a part of that, there's scenario planning that's been discussed with the community, and these are happening in all of our communities. Land development code updates that are happening intermittently, and then they're happening in each of our jurisdictions. In Hillsborough County, Little Manatee is being addressed as a separate new entity of development, and then there are a lot of things that relate to community plan implementation. So we have the land use piece, and then we have what you've been discussing in transportation. And so a lot of the issues that you're hearing about here is the transportation long-range plan, the MPO update. You've heard about mobility fees. You're going to hear today about optimization projects. There's corridor preservation plans. There's the port and the airport. They all have master plans, but they all contribute to the palette of transportation initiatives. And here on this chart, we've designated those that we think are high-level strategic initiatives with an asterisk, and some of the others we might consider implementation or tactical measures. So we have a land use and a transportation component. But at the top of your discussion and how your discussion started was we were talking about economic development and job creation. So under that category, we have a conversation about competitive sites. There's a competitive sites study that's underway looking at all the various areas of the county and the city where we might be able to attract development. If someone comes into town, where might we send them? You will hear today about key economic spaces, and these are areas where there is currently a lot of activity, job activity underway. You've talked in the past about incentives for targeted industries. You've talked about perhaps a comprehensive economic development strategy. There's conversations about tax increment financing, and we kind of see all of these fitting in this bubble of economic development. But then what's really cool is when they all come together. Because when they all come together at the juncture of each one of these are things that are happening where the major impact is going to occur. So if you look at the juncture between economic development and transportation, that really starts to begin to paint how infrastructure investments can be made, because you have early on said that you want to look at transportation for economic development and job creation. So this is what we're calling a pedal, and one of this pedal we're calling infrastructure investment. And we see a large part of your discussion being in this area where these two bubbles come together, and that is a technical term, bubbles. Between the land use and the transportation, it's the built domain, it's the built environment. What does it all look like? How does it all come together? Under this, you might look at how transit-oriented development starts to play out, because it's the relationship of your transportation and land use. And it's not to say that these are the only things that are happening, but these are some of the things that we've heard your discussion in. And then between land use and economic development, we've called this pedal predictable regulations. And this really is trying to make sure that as we move toward entitlements in the development process, that there is some predictable regulations that come out of this. The Economic Prosperity discussed some of these initiatives, but it really has been something that all of you have been talking about, that the more predictable these regulations are, the easier it is for someone who's wishing to do business in Hillsborough County to know where they need to go. You may see this in the future and it may get modified, but what we'd like to do is, as you're having a discussion and as you're talking about a particular topic, we'd like to help you to understand where you are in all of this. So today, under economic development, you will hear about key economic spaces. Under the transportation element, you will hear about what some of the recommendations are for optimization projects. And again, from our perspective, where they come together is really talking about infrastructure investment, optimization projects that are going to help economic development. Next time when you meet in December, you'll hear from Melissa on the comprehensive plan update. And again, that and how that relates to transportation is really forming and shaping our built environment. Will the transportation issues, will some of the transportation recommendations result in changes in land use patterns? So we want to introduce this to you today, and we may bring it back in future meetings to say you are here, you are all contributing, your efforts are contributing to making Hillsborough County and all its municipalities and all its pieces great places. And we may add to this and based on your input as well. So this is just the overview. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, we can move on to some of the other items on the agenda.
Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Okay. If not, then let's move on for the moment. I'd like to use that as a segue to talk about in December, we're going to be looking at the comprehensive plan and how the key economic spaces, which we'll introduce today with some, and define them in some greater detail in December, how they'll fit with the comprehensive plan. And then we're going to, in January and February, our plan is to look at very specific projects based on some of the guidance you give us today. And then beginning in March to look at larger scale additional capacity projects. So that's the our plan at the moment, subject always, of course, to your direction in terms of if you wish to move around or anything. But we plan by the end of March to have covered the major options for you. So with that, we have developed some guiding principles based on discussions we've had with you, and I'd like to just review those for the moment. Good, Eric, thank you. One is that the maintenance of existing assets and safety are givens. Y'all have all expressed to us, we've certainly heard from other people, you know, we've got lots of money invested in roadways and other things. We sure do not want those to decline, and obviously public safety is important. So those are just givens in the process. We're not going to try to rank them or anything because that will occur, and so that's just a guiding principle for us. Another, you talked about sustainability. You want to make sure whatever you do, you have the ability to maintain it and do the maintenance. Choices is something we have heard throughout the thing, and when we talk about the word choices, we mean choices of modalities, choices of routes, and choices of time. So what we're trying to do here is develop a system that will enable the public to have more choices about how they move around the community. We've all talked about regional connectivity and awareness. Obviously, there are lots of stuff going on in the counties around us. We've got to be aware of that. We factor that data as we do analyses. And as you look at options, we'll talk about what's the impact on your Pasco folks or your Polk County neighbors, et cetera, because a lot of those folks come here to work. And our last is that solution will bring community-wide benefits. And we don't mean a specific solution will necessarily be community-wide, but the total package, everybody in the county will see some benefit to this. So that's an important guiding principle we're working on. Any others you'd like to have added to this at this point? Ms. Davin?
One thing that occurs to me, Herb, on the sustainability, you've highlighted maintenance, which certainly is a big factor. But depending on what modes we might be talking about, operating funds after something is built and installed is pretty important too.
Well, let me change that to O&M and operating and maintenance. Okay. Well, if no other comments, I'll consider our guiding principles for the moment. You are at any point in time welcome to open those up for further discussion if you have any other ideas. We want to introduce today the concept of key economic spaces, and to do that, you know, we developed this off some data. It's, we hope, logically intuitive, but we want to explain how we got there. And Melissa Zarniti, the Planning Commission, will do that on the map that you see next, which is a bunch of dots. And then Eric will introduce the concept of key economic spaces himself. So, Melissa?
Good afternoon. This map before you outlines some of the 2010 job data that formed our discussion of key economic spaces. And basically it's broken into 3 tiers. Each cluster represents one of those. There are 3 of the highest level tiers, which are, as one would predict, downtown, USF, and the West Shore area. And I take that back, there's a 4th one also, just north of the airport along Anderson Road. Those 4 areas have between 45,000 and 70,000 jobs in each one of those clusters. The next tier of existing job clusters is around the Brandon area, the port, along 301. There are about 5 different clusters there, all that have between 11,000 and 25,000 jobs. And then finally, the lowest tier is the light pink areas, New Tampa, South County, those along I-75, along McIntosh Road and I-4, and then around Plant City. So those are the basis for which we developed our key economic spaces. And unless there's questions about that existing data set, I'll turn it over to Eric.
So using the data that the MPO furnished on the density of jobs, we looked at how to identify job centers that could be used for the purpose of this project, to identify transportation improvements that could help make those areas more successful. So we started with the data on the map that was shown. We've, on this map, identified what I would characterize as general locations. It's the areas that are driven by that data. We went through multiple iterations, and we tried to characterize them differently and decided against that because We think that as you go further into this project and start to look at individual communities, that you'll recognize the differences in terms of an area that may be primarily manufacturing oriented and have certain types of needs versus an area that may be an area that can sponsor both residential opportunities as well as business. So we decided not to characterize them. Also, we kept the sizes relatively modest, not to try to get into a discussion of how large they should be or specific geographic boundaries. By keeping them at this size, it was easier to clearly see the different areas. But as you can see, if you look at the ones, the West Shore one bleeds into the one that includes the airport and the areas north of the airport. When you get out towards I-4 and I-75, again, we have multiple areas that are even at this size touching each other. But the intent here is to drive the discussion of where transportation improvements would be made to support moving people in and out of these areas in between them. And so that's the purpose of this exercise. One thing, though, that you heard Melissa mention that is specifically excluded from this chart is that initially we also identified an area along I-4 between the Sable Park key economic space and the Plant City one, and we also had additional key economic spaces on the map south of the Brandon one, further south as you get to each of the exits along 75. We pulled those off for now because we recognize that the competitive sites process is ongoing. Clearly, from that map that you just looked at, there already are some job densities in those areas, but we decided to really stick for this presentation with the existing sites, and as we have information, and I think we'll have the first information on competitive sites start to be available next month, just to give you a sense of where that project is going. It won't be done by next month, but we'll be able to give you some status. Clearly, there will be additional areas identified that are emerging areas. Are there any questions on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Before we leave the key economic space map, next month we'll be looking at those spaces in some greater detail in terms of population, jobs, transportation issues. And if you also notice that obviously these spaces are connected in their flows between the spaces. And our technical term for that is the spine. So next month we'll have a discussion with you about the transportation spine because that will become an important part as we talk about projects and everything. But now we want to turn to the optimization strategies. And again, these are designed to make best use of the existing resources. They're also designed, a couple of them are demonstration ones which could show you how a specific project could make a better use without making a full commitment to it. And so Jean Duncan of the City of Tampa is going to begin that presentation, and we have a lineup behind her, and she'll introduce the next speaker, and we'll just move on through. But at any point, stop and ask a question if you have one. So, Jean?
Thank you, Herb. Yes, I'm Jean Duncan with the City of Tampa. The next piece we wanted to introduce to you, you can find in your handout, optimization strategies. Basically, this is a set of project types that we group together that essentially optimizes the existing infrastructure that we already have out on the streets and has a lot of different benefits that we could create in a generally quicker amount of time with a more modest cost. And I say that in relativity to transportation projects, which are usually very long and very expensive. Basically, these projects would enhance mobility, they would enhance safety, and most importantly, they would increase the economic productivity for a region by allowing better and safer transportation of the systems that we already have in place. Just to kind of give you a framework around these projects, you can follow in your handout, we categorize them into 4 major groups. We've got active transportation projects, which we've got some examples in the handout, which we are identifying as advanced traffic management systems and rapid incidents type of improvements. We're going to give you some details on those. We've got alternative modes type projects, which basically covers alternative modalities such as more frequent bus service, potentially ferry service, and also bus rapid transit options as well. Roadway enhancements are more standard traditional type projects such as complete streets and intersection improvements. And we've got some demonstration projects as a category to consider, such as some traffic flow, flyovers, and corridor management systems. So within those 4 categories, we tried to find a way to give some sort of separation of the benefits and challenges of each of those 4 categories. And we basically came up with 4 dimensions so you could kind of sort a little bit of the choices. And those dimensions that we came up with were, the first one being choice. This one speaks to what sort of choice it gives the user of the product. We came up with logistics as another category that addresses whether or not that particular improvement would increase the ability to move freight. Capacity was another dimension that we looked at in terms of, is it more of a safety improvement? Is it carrying more capacity? What's its ability to move more vehicles within the system? And then the 4th dimension was timeline. Some of these could be done very quickly, others would take a little bit more time, but generally as a grouping, they're all quicker type of projects than your typical interchange or lane widening type of a project. The circles on the bottom was just a way to kind of rank of those 4 choices, would the particular project that we're speaking about have a high or low ranking of these dimensions. And you can see with the yellow circles, the 4th one would be the highest, the 4 circles would have the highest, and the 1 circle would have the lowest. So that's, again, the framework under which we're trying to give some sense of how these projects compare to each other. And I'm going to kick off with the first one, and then I'll let Beth Alden follow with the second one. The first project category that we're proposing is what we're calling advanced traffic management systems. This is well spoken about, but not often well understood because it's not quite as visible as your typical lane widening type project. Basically, what advanced traffic management systems is, it's a set of different traffic treatments such as controllers, signals, cameras, fiber in the ground. Those components together, channeled into a traffic management center, allow the technology that's available to optimize how the system is flowing traffic on the road, how the pedestrian signals are operating within the traffic intersection, and it gives a much better use to the system in terms of safety, mobility, and efficiency. And that packaging is what we're calling the advanced traffic management system. There's known and quantifiable benefits to this type of system, and that's the first category that we're proposing. I'm going to let Beth Alden come up and talk about our next option.
Thanks, Jean. And I have the next 3 items. The Rapid Incident Scene Clearance Program is another one of those programs under active traffic management. We talked about this in the context of the MPO's congestion management process. It seemed like a best practice that had come out of the Department of Transportation. And basically the idea here is, let's give a bonus to towing companies to clear crashes off of major roads as quickly as possible. The DOT has brought down their clearance time to, I know this sounds like a long time, but they brought it down to 45 minutes on average using this method. So the suggestion would be, why don't we look at expanding this to some of our major urban arterials? And the issue here is our crash rates in Hillsborough County are 2 to 4 times the national average. At peak hour, this can mean a significant problem not only in traffic congestion, with adding on average 25 minutes to a 40-minute trip. It also really increases the rate of secondary crashes as people brake, seeing the crash ahead of them. So a lot of great benefits just from a real quick fix of offering some bonuses to towing companies. The next project on our list is freight movement. Thanks, Eric. The Department of Transportation has also done a lot of study of where trucks are coming in and out of our major trade areas in Hillsborough County. We're a real economic engine in the state for trade. there are some spots that are, on the interstate that the DOT has been working on, but there are also places where our county roads and our city roads are providing that last mile link between our economic engines and those major corridors. And that's what we're talking about here. And we're not talking about, a major investment like, building the new I-4 Selman connector, or building a major new grade separation over a railroad crossing. Here we're just talking about some of the basic things like change the traffic signal timing or change the turn lane lengths so that they better accommodate the truck movements, and you don't have trucks ending up jumping up on top of the curb and having ongoing maintenance issues and safety issues and so forth. So, just fixing some of those operational improvements could be a modest investment, but also have a significant benefit for those last mile linkages on our goods movement system. And then the other project that I'll be speaking to you about is the MacDill Air Force Base to South Shore Ferry. And we had some discussion about whether this should be a demonstration project because it's a new mode of transportation, basically, in our system. But we came back to, we're basically optimizing use of some of our existing dock facilities. And we have, this existing waterway. Let's see if we can make better use of what we have. So the idea here came out in part from an MPO feasibility study that was done a couple of years ago, looking at destinations around the bay, what are the ones with the greatest demand between them, and the most competitive link that came out of that analysis was between MacDill Air Force Base and South Hillsborough County. That is a long commute all the way around the bay versus a short water ride. Have some existing dock facilities, and there is federal assistance for MacDill employees to use transit in their commutes. So it seems to make sense from those points of view. There is, of course, a private proposal that came forward earlier this year, and that's still under negotiation about exactly what that price tag would be. So I'm going to turn this over to Marco with Hart to talk about the next two projects, unless there are any questions on those. Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon. Marco Sandusky with Hart. I'm going to be speaking about the two alternate modes projects in here that relate to transit service. The first being an expansion of evening and weekend bus service. These alternate mode projects related to transit really are the types of projects that can be done relatively quickly. A significant amount of work has already been done. These projects that I'm talking about are within Hart's transit development plan, which our CEO, Philip Hale, will talk with you about later in the agenda today. An expansion of evening and weekend service, here we're talking about adding additional frequencies, going later at night, adding some service on Saturdays and Sundays. So we're not adding buses to the network, we're not adding new routes. But these additions in service on the weekends and in the evenings could potentially add an additional million in ridership annually on transit. And that's part of the reason for that is transit service in the evenings and weekends can really help particularly support particular sectors like medical, hospitality, and transportation, which have a lot of shifts that are late nights and weekends. And right now with limited service in the evenings and weekends, it can be challenging both for a transit-dependent rider and a choice rider to be able to use transit, for it to be something that is feasible. So an increase in Saturday and Sunday service and in evening service can not only increase ridership and the use of transit for the evenings and the weekends, but it can really help 7 days a week and throughout the day, because it can make it a much more feasible option, make transit a more feasible option for an individual. So this is a small addition that can really have a significant impact when somebody's trying to determine whether or not transit is a choice that's available to them and something that is feasible. The second project that I'll talk about is the Metro Rapid East-West project. As you know, HART launched its first premium transit service, the Metro Rapid North-South, which has been very successful. This transit service is a BRT type service. The Metro Rapid East-West route, which is one of 6 proposed routes that are in the HART vision plan, and Mr. Hale will talk a little bit more about those as part of our transit development plan. But the East-West plan is one that is through 30% design. HART is in a position now where really we're seeking funding to be able to take the next step with the Metro Rapid East-West. And it would run from Temple Terrace to the airport. And again, it really adds a choice for riders. Some features of the Metro Rapid system and this East-West proposed project are improved stations, shelters that are more modern, that have bike racks at them. Also technology improvements that help speed up the reliability of the route, make it something that really is quite reliable and can move quickly through the corridor. And then beyond that, the Metro Rapid East-West project would also just add a route that has excellent frequencies to make it a very good option. So buses that are coming by every 15 minutes makes it a very attractive option if you're trying to be able to have a choice between driving your automobile or choosing transit. Now you'll see with this that we also include the addition of a paratransit vehicle maintenance site, because one of the things about this Metro Rapid East-West project is it would require additional vehicles, and that would require us to be able to move our paratransit, our van fleet, to another maintenance site. So that's one of the assumptions that's included here in being able to move forward with the Metro Rapid East-West. And if no one has any questions on that, I'll turn it over. We'll start talking here about roadway enhancements, and Brett will start covering those.
Good afternoon. My name is Brett Goka with Plant City. And I'm here to discuss with you today intersections, but not intersections in the traditional sense that we speak of left turns and right turn lanes and signal timings and queue links and that sort of thing. But intersections as an optimization strategy tied to job growth. Now, many of these strategies reference basic market and planning principles. They reduce traffic transportation costs and increase transportation system efficiencies, which increase economic productivity and development. But in our evaluation of key economic spaces, the needs will vary depending on the location. The downtown Tampa may need more commuter mobility, along with pedestrian mobility and transit. Plant City may need more industrial mobility in the form of tractor-trailer movements would need to be evaluated more closely. Temple Terrace, for their downtown redevelopment, they may also need more pedestrian-type mobility. So the key economic spaces each have a unique set of needs. And this is really different from how most of our governments have it set up, where we all have a needs list. We can all just go down a needs list and say, you know, we've got 10 million or 12 million, X amount of dollars for intersection improvements. But this is really tied to the economic space in particular, and that's what our focus has been. Now, for this strategy to be effective, we need to evaluate and rank each one of these intersection improvements to the degree they increase efficiency or favor the high-value movements, such as freight movements, business travel, and emergency services. And again, that's a change in how we look at things. Typically, when we look at an intersection, we're looking at a complete intersection project, where we're going to add sidewalks, we're going to add turn lanes, we're going to add pedestrian crossings. But here, I think these need to be ranked by how they impact the economic space in particular. And it's a different strategy for us. And to be honest, as an engineer, it's a different approach to how we look at these intersections and how we rank them and how we evaluate them for youth. Because typically we do look at a complete intersection and not just essentially the economic space it's going to support. So if you have any questions, that's my presentation. Thank you very much. Bob Gordon with Temple Terrace will be the next presenter.
Thank you, Brett. Bob Gordon, Temple Terrace Public Works Director. I'm here to talk to you today about complete streets. You know, for a long time, we engineers have been focusing on developing and designing streets to facilitate vehicular traffic. And it's been a few years now that the focus has been, let's not move, you know, we start to look out for vehicular traffic, but let's make room for multimodal traffic, for pedestrians, for bicyclists. There's a couple things that complete streets do for us. They facilitate multimodal transportation. They also attract development and activity to an area. Those are important features of these mobility type projects. Now, a complete street project is not one set of parameters. It can be anything from replacing street lighting, doing traffic calming, putting in medians, shoulders, gateway features, sidewalks, crosswalks, sharrows, bike lanes, trails, on-street garbage cans in some certain areas where you have a lot of pedestrian traffic. There's a lot of things you can do. Now, it's not one size fits all. Every project is unique. Generally, what we're looking for is trying to fit a complete street project within the existing right-of-way. That's what makes it affordable and makes it possible to retrofit a lot of our existing facilities. Now, I'd like to mention that obviously this is not a new initiative. This is something that every member of this, every government agency in Hillsborough County is currently undertaking this. I know the City of Tampa, their Envision program is a very ambitious, aggressive program that's going to be looking at Nebraska and Hillsborough corridors, the Center City Master Plan. Those will make those corridors much more livable and much more available to different types of modes of transportation. Plant City's got the Collins Street corridor study that they're examining to make that a more pleasant place to be and an easier way to move up and down that corridor. Hillsborough County is working on the Fletcher Avenue project between I-275 and Bruce B. Downs to make that safer and a better place to be. Temple Terrace, we have recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, completed the 56th Street Enhancement Project. I know a little more about this one. We spent about $4.7 million on that project. We got some federal grant money, about $2.2 million, and some community investment, grant program money for 1.2. The city put in 1.3 out of the 4.7. So we look for opportunities, obviously, in these complete street projects to leverage the local funding with grant money, and that's the opportunities we need to look going forward in this program as well as we try to optimize this particular initiative. I would like to say that there are a couple communities I'm aware of that do have complete street resolutions in place. The City of Tampa, I do know, has one, and the Temple Terrace 2 years ago modeled ours after the City of Tampa, so we also have one. So there's a commitment at the local level to make our streets safer and more passable for transportation modes of different types. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about this particular option. We think it's an optimization option that really needs to be considered in going forward. If there be no questions, Mike Williams is going to discuss the real-time corridor management systems, a demonstration project.
Good afternoon, Mike Williams with Hillsborough County. The projects I'm going to speak to, and let me get, there we go, are maybe something a little bit different than what we've done in this area in the past. They have been done in other areas of the country and been successful. So the first one is real-time corridor management systems. These are primarily to enhance our interstate system or to squeeze a little bit more out of them or a little more capacity out of them. And there are really kind of 4 different projects that we're talking about here. The first one is something called interchange on-ramp monitoring. That's a system where you limit or you slow people getting onto the interstate. And what that does is it helps when you actually get onto the interstate to flow better, and you actually increase capacity by slowing people and restricting them as they get on. And there's something called the diverging diamond interchange, and there's a picture of it in your packet and up on the screens. But essentially, it's a way to route traffic through an interchange, and this wouldn't be the interstate part. This would be, say, an interchange over the interstate or perhaps under. It reduces crashes and it increases the capacity of the intersection or the interchange. It's just really a different way of routing the traffic through. And we have something called coordinated traffic management with parallel and intersecting roads. Essentially what that is kind of developing a network of roads that would be kind of parallel to the interstate. And what that does for you is it keeps the local or the short trips off of the interstate, thus increasing the capacity of the interstate. A couple examples, of I-75 through the Brandon area. We have Falkenberg Road on one side and Gorntail Lake Road on the other side. It keeps all those trips, the short local trips, off the interstate. People will take these new roads that run parallel. And then lastly, an alternate routing plan. And really what that is, it's an incident management system. So if there's a crash on the interstate, for example, it routes people off the interstate. It shows them which way to go to get around whatever the incident is, crash or whatever, and then get back on the interstate after the incident. Frequently today, people either stay on the interstate and they're essentially stuck there, or they get off the interstate and they don't know where to go. GPS has helped with that a lot, but in a lot of cases they don't know where to go. And then, moving on to the next project, be a concept called tolled flyover ramps. This is a concept where you take, for example, a busy intersection that has a lot of left turns, for example. And what you do is you build a ramp that gets a car or truck through the intersection without having to stop. Typically, this is done with a toll situation, and at the same time, we wouldn't remove existing, say, left turn lanes, but this would be an additional option. Kind of the beauty of it is you sort of jump to the front of the line, or it's also frequently called queue jumping, meaning you jump ahead of the queue, but you pay a toll to do it, and you don't slow the queue down. You're not really getting ahead of somebody, but you just kind of skip the queue, and you do it via typically a bridge structure, or maybe perhaps a tunnel, but typically it's a bridge structure in Florida. And since it's tolled, there's not really typically a lot of upfront costs other than your feasibility studies and your bonding requirements and things like that. With that, if there's any questions on these, I'll be glad to take them. Otherwise, we'll turn it back over to her.
I'd like to thank everybody for your presentations. The project management group worked quite hard on identifying these and trying to frame them at an appropriate level for discussion here. What we intend to do, based on your direction today, is to drill down into these and identify specific projects related to key economic spaces in the spine, and then to bring those back to you in January and February for your guidance. But my question of you today is, any of these, do you want to take them off the table and not have staff work at them?
Well,
Vice Mayor?
I don't know if I want to take any off, but
Okay.
what I like about the approach we have right here is that I think before we have the ability to go to the public and ask for additional taxes, additional funding, additional support, we have to be able to prove that we are maximizing the current system that we have and that we're utilizing all the possibilities that we currently have. And I think once we have proven that, then I think that we gain trust from the public that the next step is for light rail, whatever that case may be, you know, whatever that other plan is. I do like the fact that you're going to take these and put the data behind it, because obviously we got to have the data, and, you know, Commissioner, we've talked about that, able to support every single project. But if I look at the money spent, and I've been on the MPO for a lifetime, it seems like, you know, I can look at one simple street that we expand, I won't name it, but it's $45 million. I can name one that's attached to it, it's another $40 million. So I look at this one little section in Plant City where we're going to have about, you know, $85 to $90 million invested in 2 roads. I just took my little shopping list, you know, from our one-on-one and again today. And I said, if we took certain elements of this plan right now and we invested $200 to $225 million, we could show the public that we could maximize, that we are maximizing our current system. We're doing everything possible to get every inch and every ounce out of our current transportation system available. And we also could give them, the public, more options, you know, to where maybe they like to be able to be queued to the front and have the passovers. Maybe they like the new management transportation systems. But I would say that the ATMS system, that's something we've used in Plant City. We've had it in place now about 7 years. And I'm personally amazed that we don't have it throughout the entire county. So I would love to see more data drilled down on that particular item, because I don't know how we ask for additional funding in other areas if we're not maximizing our ATMS. I believe that the rapid incident scene clearance program, I think that's a no-brainer. Okay. Maybe that's not the proper term to be used, but sometimes you got to use, you know, harsh terms to say that. For that investment, I don't know why we wouldn't do that today. When can we vote on that, you know? The program for freight movement, you're talking about $10 million over, or $12 million over 5 years, okay? Again, I would put that in the same classification. I would skip a couple of pages here, and to me, I'm not a hard expert, but I would definitely say that if we were going to spend $225 million, the new Metro Rapid system should be something that would go to the forefront. But I'm not a hard expert, but something has to be done and some investment has to be made so that we're getting every dollar out of HART we possibly can, okay? Then I would simply take my shopping list here and go with the intersection improvements like Brett Goko mentioned to us just a few minutes ago. And I would definitely do the complete streets, the real-time corridor. I mean, I was fascinated with that. I've never seen that before, okay? But the more you study it, the more you look at it, I would love for us to pick an intersection in Hillsborough County, you know, invest in that intersection and see what the public in Hillsborough County thinks about it. I think we would find our voters wanting to invest in a lot more of these intersections throughout our county. And then finally, the tolled flyovers. I mean, that would be my shopping list. And I know I'm only taking out about 3 or 4 different projects in there, but I would say that if we put together some type of mechanism, we figured out how to be able to fund that, we could then tell our voters, hey, we've done everything we can. We've maxed out every possibility we can to get the most out of our system. This is what we need to do next. So I'm looking forward to you to come back with the data to support those projects.
All right.
You know.
Okay. Any other thoughts that you have? Mr. Murphy?
I would, and I guess I would like to get even a little more information with this map of the key economic spaces and see what transportation systems overlay on top of those.
Okay.
So you could see really what's deficient and what's not. So going back to Rick's comment, Rick, you did a great analysis, so that was really good. Not sure about investing in the real-time corridor management system. I guess you could do a trial basis on one, but it looks pretty complicated. And I probably wouldn't do it near Sun City or any place that would take, you know, I mean, they use golf carts down there. I couldn't see a golf cart going through there. I mean, that would be really problematic, but.
We'll be very careful about where we select the
I hope
demonstration
so.
site.
I think, yes, definitely. But I would like to see an overlap map on what exists through these areas, because you're right, we can make use of exactly what we have, but if we're identifying key economic spaces, then what's going to be the vision for promoting transportation within those? Because remember, we want to build up densities. That's what the object is of key economic spaces, is to build densities so that we can create more well-defined corridors, traffic corridors, for our transportation systems. Right now, we're kind of sprinkled throughout the community.
And Commissioner, that's entirely exactly the data we plan to begin bringing to you in December, so that we can drill down into these spaces and understand them from
I
a
do.
variety
I
of
think
dimensions.
this was a very good, it's very complete about maximizing what we could do and authorize now and get a direct benefit in a couple of years, rather than, go for something a little more futuristic that might take 10.
Well, what I
Have to wait.
noticed is that, each one of them, some of them have a benefit of 3.8%, some of them have a benefit of 67%, and when you add it all up, it's about 300%. I said, wow, for $225 million, we could just beam ourselves to work. So, I mean, no wait time at all, so.
Okay. Chairman Hagan?
Well, I want to say, first of all, that I agree with Mayor Lott and with Commissioner Merman's comments. But what I guess I've been struggling with during all of our meetings is that, from the outset, when the County Commission, developed this policy leadership group, the goal, at least from my understanding, was to align our economic development strategies with our transportation planning, and even says that on one of these things here. Transportation for Economic Development, Hillsborough County. And I do believe that all these options are critically important and needed, as Mayor Lott stated. However, most of these strategies, and I know it says optimization, and I understand the basis for that, are not going to ignite our economic development job creation, certainly not in the short term. And maybe I'm just getting impatient, but I believe that we need to think big. When you speak with site selectors and economic development folks, they will tell you that companies considering where to locate are frequently interested in our inventory of permit-ready sites. Well, the number one way to create permit-ready sites is to have the needed infrastructure in place. If we want to continue to build on our recent successes and take our community to the next level, I believe our goal should be to identify the needed infrastructure improvements in either EDAs or in the areas where we want to incentivize that growth. And I think that will ensure that the next Amazon, the next USAA, the next headquarter company will choose our community. And we need to go in that direction. I mean, I believe all this is very important and necessary, but I don't think this is going to land the next USAA, the next Amazon, the next headquarter.
Thank you for those comments.
Commissioner, if I can ask you a question. So let's say we identified, okay, that geographical area, okay? What transportation input would you want to see as far as infrastructure placed in there to attract the next Amazon? What would that be?
Well, I think first we need to determine where those areas are. I mean, is it Plant City? Is it the I-4 corridor? Is it South Shore?
But once that's determined, though,
Well, then I think we look at where we've successfully done this in the past. And two that jump to mind are South Shore, with the corporate park there, infrastructure we put in. Therefore, we're getting Amazon. We look at the Brandon area for a $6 million investment. We're creating 3,000 jobs, $3 million revenue stream a year. And after 5 years, an annual economic impact of $113 million from Bass Pro coming in there. Those are success stories. I think we need to identify the areas and then identify the infrastructure. I don't know. It may not be a road.
So that infrastructure could be
transit.
different in every
It may be transit. It may be BRT. It may be rail. I don't know what that is.
Okay.
Candidly, it may be water and sewer. The infrastructure. Whatever that infrastructure is that's going to drive and make those areas permit ready, that's going to catch the eye of corporations looking to move here, where they know they can buy, they can close, they're going. That's the
Sure.
banner. And the specific areas or infrastructure, I need staff to, give us that information.
Well, and let me do say, Mr. Chairman, our intent is beginning next month to start bringing you whatever competitive sites and data we have, because that's the data we need to be able to address the issue you're aware. And I think as soon as y'all start to have that, then we can start to have the broader conversation about the infrastructure that's needed there. We simply don't have that data yet, but we hope to have it beginning next month. So we can start to merge these conversations about key economic spaces and competitive sites and what needs to happen to make those sites work. So I hear your urgency. I think everybody's moving as fast as they can because they recognize the need to do that. So, Commissioner Chris?
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Hagan. I think that there's some good work done here, but we're getting down into the weeds.
Yeah.
I mean, whether we have a turn circle or a crisscross or, a bifurcated split lane process, I mean, this is all for the designers at the time and the place to determine which application would be appropriate. I think if we're going to go after the big dog employers, we're going to have at least the basic infrastructure in place, and we need not look further than just north of us in Pasco County, Little Pasco County, and what they did with Highway 54. They identified that they had two density areas on opposite ends of the county, and the connector was this little two-lane po-hunk road called 54, and they went in and put in all the stormwater, all the underground utilities, all the lighting, all the bus stops and everything else that was necessary to connect the two sides of the county. And guess what? They went in and rezoned all the available thousands of acres of land that are along it, and now they've got an economic development district, and it's centrally located. That's something we could look at on how do we leverage that. Well, you know what? Our CSX line and our Highway 41 and our 75 go right through it. So, it connects what they want to do to what we're doing. I think that Commissioner Hagan, in his wisdom, has touched on a nerve here that, we need not get too deep into these weeds, but look at that bigger, broader picture of making sure that we're ready to go after and be able to compete for those bigger deals.
Well, and Herb, when they showed us this map, what you needed to bring, which I thought you were going to, was the full report that showed each one of these regions that have the pink circles. It shows what the potential job growth is going to be. So you can relate the jobs to the circle, and then if you overlay what transportation infrastructure you already have available, you'll know where you're deficient. But I would suggest that you send that, I don't know if everybody got it, I did get a copy, the Planning Commission did it, that job by region, because you can see some of these areas like I-4 corridor, huge area for growth. Down south, huge area for growth. Downtown, huge for growth. West Shore is growing, but it's not as fast as some of these other regions. But I think that information needs, and we do need to move faster. I'm like Commissioner Hagan.
Okay.
I think that today, I would like to see a lot more information attached to this so we could really be ready to do something in December or January.
Thank you for that feedback. We do have that document where we're adding to some of the traffic and transportation issues to it. The plan is to share that with you December, and I certainly hear the message about speed. So,
Well then, I don't know Commissioner Hagan's thoughts here. I love the idea of us choosing where our next great sites are going to be, then throwing that infrastructure in place, okay? For economic development, that makes the most sense of anything we could possibly do on this, this commission right now. Wouldn't the next step before we go into anything else is to determine where's our next great opportunities for development in Hillsborough County then? Isn't that the next step? Once we determine those sites, then we would figure out what the infrastructure is?
Let me ask someone to respond to that, because that's the competitive sites process, and I don't want to speak for it myself. So,
is that right?
Mr. Merrill, do you have anybody here who can speak to that
Why are we
yourself?
even looking at this if If South County needs this, and it's not this.
Alone.
I think they all headed out the back door.
Obviously not.
Call
It's a joy
security.
being the county administrator.
Call security. Bring them back. Yeah, so what we've done is, you know, everyone wants to move this forward, and we have to kind of remember we've been at this for 4 or 5 months here. We've retained consultants that have been hard at work with staffs from all of the jurisdictions doing the competitive site identification. We'll have a pretty good sense of what that is in December. They'll continue to work. That is the key overlay. It's the answer to the question, where are our main competitive sites? How developable are they? For what purpose? And then aligning that with where the existing job centers are, the pink circles, and then coming up with some recommendations on the spine, whether that's managed lanes for buses, whether it's some form of rail or other thing. We just haven't been able, with everyone working as hard as they can, we haven't been able to get it to this meeting. I can assure you, we'll have something in December, and I think the pieces will start coming together. It will start to make some sense. I wish I could have had it here today for you, but you know, it's a massive process. I mean, when you think of 1,000 square miles of county and really trying to inventory those sites, make sense of them, and really give you something you can make decisions on, it's really a lot of work. And so I can assure you we're pulling all the oars in the water here. So,
Chairman Hagan.
You know, last thing I want to say, make sure I wasn't, you know, I'm clear. I recognize it's not an easy or quick process, and you know, I fully support the optimization strategies. Many of these were included in the 2010 referendum, so I fully support this. And these are not mutually exclusive goals.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that
Right.
I'm clear. I mean, I do support going in this direction. I just don't want to lose focus of what it was my understanding the initial purpose in organizing this leadership group was aligning our economic and transportation priorities, and just don't want to lose track of that.
Sure. Thank you.
Can I make,
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, I do want to say, and I like this, but, and again, I think we're sprinkling resources. I mean, I don't want to be like all over the place. If there are clear corridors and clear job opportunities, we have to invest in those. That's the prioritization. I think that has to come out of this. That needs to come first. And then we have to balance, you know, the bike and the pedestrian-friendly zones also too. But I think we've, as what the guy from DOT says, we've sprinkled our resources in this region long enough. And we've got to start, you know, getting up to the bar and saying exactly what we want to drink. Really, that's basically what it is. And if we can't say it, then we shouldn't be here, we shouldn't be making decisions. But we have to invest, we're gonna have to invest in clear choices. But we can't be all over the place. And we have to decide what's gonna give us the best outcome and the best return on our investment.
And that's been the helpful thing about the public meetings that we've been going to, because all of the managers, myself and the city managers, have all been going to all of the public engagement meetings, and we are getting a good sense of what that means. So in Plant City, Strawberry Crest High School, it was very clear, you know, for them, a priority is getting circulator buses. It's getting more bike and ped. Now that's going to be different than, pick another area, West Shore, downtown, USF. And as we're going around and hearing, you know, we're getting a really good sense of what that is. And what Ron Barton and others are doing with consultants is prioritizing, placing a value on what is the high value return, because you're right, limited resources, where can we get the biggest bang for the buck? So I think you will be satisfied as you start to see this come forward next month. And if not, then I guess I won't be here anymore, but but we are working very hard to get you ready.
We want to make sure you're satisfied.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Well, the direction I hear from you is continue to work these, but we also want to start to really focus on the areas where there's really significant impact, and we need to, you know, define those, have a discussion, and y'all are going to have to make some prioritization decisions about whatever the package is you want to put together. clearly its impact on jobs is going to be very significant variable there. But you know, so you know, as I say, our plans for January and February, we'll shift them accordingly. You know, they're simply our plans at this point, and they'll be responsive to what you want to try and do. Any other comments on this before I go to the next item? Okay. Well, I'd like to ask Philip Hale to come up and present Hart's 10-year plan, so you'd be aware of it. Phil?
Thank you.
Let me get you your thing here.
It's been interesting so far.
Well, you'll just have a...
Where's the button up there?
There you go. All right.
Thank you. Gentlemen and ladies, I am Philip Hale. I'm the CEO of Hart. Looking around the table, most of you have probably seen this presentation 2 or 3 times, so bear with me. What I agreed to do was to kind of shorten it a little bit, and if you have any specific questions, I've been more than willing after the meeting, or any questions you have at any time, then you can check with me. But this is the term that we use is TDP, which is Transit Development Plan, and we're carrying this to a different step, where it's the strategic roadmap that we've developed over the last 12 to 18 months, and we're moving this forward. This is basically a 10-year business plan, and because of requirements of FDOT, it has to be broken into 2 categories. It's called the status quo and the vision plan. And this is in compliance with the FDOT's requirements. So the main thing that we're really interested in doing this is that this maintains our eligibility for state funding or block grants, which is very important to us because we use this for operating. Last year it equated to about $4.3 million. It requires a major update every 5 years. However, we took it to the next step, and we took our regular update, which was approved in 2011, and we have to submit an annual modification, minor modification, but we carried it to a next step. In essence, we've updated a major update ahead of time, and we've advised the FDOT group about that. So the term we use is a full refresh of the TDP. Why we did this is what's going on today, which is the conversation of envisioning process of the community. The main thing is we wanted to align our TDP to our budgetary process, which has not been done in the past. We modified part of the process in emphasizing regionalism, which is also a big discussion that's been going on for a couple of years. And then from the Hart side, it's the growth and demand. The good news is that our ridership has increased over 18% since 2008. The bad news is our ridership has increased 18% within 2008 because we're doing it with basically less buses and about the same funding. Just in the last 8 months of FY13, it's been roughly, we closed out FY13 all modes at 15 million trips. That's the highest it's ever been for Hart. Status quo plan, this is important. We estimate revenue from the projected fare increases, increased ridership, and growth of ad valorem. So this is going to allow us to proceed with additional non-peak enhancements. And what we're saying there is that as incremental revenue comes in, we're going to reallocate and put the service on the street as much as we can. This coming year, FY14, we've increased the additional non-peak miles by 1.2 million, almost 1.3 million miles. And we're expanding our weekend service and our night service. And as mentioned earlier, this is really geared toward people that work in the hospital areas, work at night, et cetera. We're trying to meet those specific needs as much as we can. We will not include our additional peak service or any route expansion. And the reason for that is that requires more vehicles and more operating expense. This will be tied to our annual budget. This is a new approach. Vision plan. This is where everybody gets excited and wants to know where we're going in the future. This is again tied to our 10-year plan. We have proposed metro rapid routes, and if this comes to pass, then we're looking at an increase in basically 13,000 miles, daily miles, and 5.5 million trips, 5.5 million riders. It will require 70 new branded CNG fueled buses, includes discussion about a circulator service in Plant City, additional peak, flex, paratransit service. We laid it out, what it would take, 5 new flex route services. We'd expand our express routes by 4. We'd increase our local routes by 9. And then the circulator routes, USF, West Shore, and downtown. Doing all this will require 2 additional facilities. And the reason for this is our existing facility, which was a modified trucking facility that became operational around 1990, is maxed out as far as storage and maintenance capabilities. So the 2 would be 1 for vans, 1 for additional buses. 15-16 can be funded, and it'll be moved into the status quo plan. 17-23 is unfunded. Okay, you need to understand this. A capital shortfall for this 10-year plan in the vision plan is $400 million. Shortfall, $400 million. That's just the capital plan. And then the operating shortfall is $54 million. If we were to do everything that's identified in the vision plan. Needless to say, we want to lay it out, say this is a pretty good plan, this is a vision. We got to figure out if we can get some funding, what funding we can, we'll start moving it into the status quo plan. Does not mean we're saying we're going to run all 6 metro rapid routes. It does not mean we're going to run all, put the additional 9 routes in. We would cherry pick as funding comes in, we start moving it over into the status quo plan. This buys us time to keep moving through this. Questions?
Can you show the committee members how those Metro Rapid East-West routes, as they have been foreseen, overlap onto the...
Key economic spaces.
Yeah, the pink spaces, thank you, that are laid out on the plot plan for today?
East-West. This is the east-west plan, which basically routes from Temple Terrace, goes over to, and since Mr. Rotello was here, he disappeared. We always say TIA, and he wanted us to say West Shore, so we'll say West Shore TIA. Then this is the Kennedy Boulevard to TIA. And by the way, on the east-west, it overlaps, it crosses the north-south, which is our plan. So we have 2 routes at this point going to plan to go to TIA. This is the new Tampa, which would start at just north of State Road 54 at Wiregrass. They're putting in a transfer station up in that area, and we would come down Bruceby Downs, come across the Bears, and come on into our Metro Rapid station downtown. This is Brandon. I think the Brandon route's pretty aggressive, but we like it. Let's go back one. Del Mabry. Del Mabry is an interesting route, even though we say we overlay it on the economic developments. When we did some of the ridership projections, Del Mabry was a big one. Gun Highway and Bush Boulevard.
That's why I wanted to get simplified maps.
And that's it. Any questions? And by the way, the full TDP is on our webpage, and the maps that I just showed you are on our webpage. And if anybody wants them, I'll send them to you directly. I think it's, we have a vision plan. There is one question that has come to me and my staff as we've done these presentations is, it's bus-centric. Where's rail? Rail's not in it, but it's not included, but it's not excluded. In other words, we have the capability of taking the plan, and as the discussions mature and whatever, we can roll it in or leave it out. That will be up to the direction of the park board of directors, et cetera. So.
Is it possible, as the committee staff collects all the other underlying data, is it possible to have any ridership data with these?
Absolutely, we already have it. We can overlay, what Commissioner Merman was speaking about was if you identify these specific routes, and I've heard talk about the spine, we can overlay current bus routes and the specific routes and the ridership by trip, by day, week, whatever. We can slice it and dice it. We have a lot of data. We simply can just overlay it, as Steve suggested, once you decide on what's the economic development areas that you want to go with. Looking at the map last night, the economic development map, I looked at it and said, boy, that sits well with about 3 of my Metro Rapid routes that we selected. But then I thought, you don't see it, so we need to, I agree that we need to overlay it.
Okay. Any other questions, Phil? All right. Thanks.
You bet.
Okay. Let me just review our plan for December to make sure it meets your expectations. We're going to bring you maps of key economic spaces at a greater level of detail than you saw today, talking about population growth, projected job growth, and some of the transportation issues that are associated with that. At the same time, we're going to interface the whole comprehensive plan discussion in those scenarios. So we're actually going to be asking you for guidance in terms of what's the direction you want to see those plans go in terms of density along those key economic spaces, development along South I-75, development along I-4. So this will be a pretty important guidance meeting for us in terms of you're giving us direction about what you want to see. To the degree that we have information about the competitive sites, we'll share what we have. So you'll get that. So those are really the 3 major topics that are going to interface, and we will certainly have our materials and we'll be briefings beforehand so that you can be fully prepared to that. But we are going to be asking some very specific guidance in terms of what you want to see happening in that month. Based on that guidance, then we'll take the next step, of course. So we will move with that. Any other expectations you have of December that you would care to share with me now? Commissioner Becker?
So if I understand what you're saying, when we're looking at the economic development overlay areas, and from what I'm hearing the conversation today, are we looking at then taking this plan for next month and overlaying some of those areas to see how this correlates? Will we see that next month?
I think, Phil, you can do that for next month, right? What you just said? Let me have him make that commitment, not me.
Yes, I could do that.
Okay. Yeah, what we want to have a discussion, good answer. Yeah, we want to have a discussion with you about what we call the spine, and that's just sort of how this all connects. But part of that is the bus routes, part of it may be some railroad freight lines you want to see. We'll be working with the project management team, the managers, to define a variety of ways for you to look at it, not that we get you bogged down in detail, but so you can really see what's going on there. So it is our intent to provide you a good, solid understanding of how these spaces fit or can fit or could fit, depending upon decisions that you make. And we want to talk about that in the context of how you want to shape the future growth of the county and where you want it to occur. So this is where these 2 big conversations are now coming together next month.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see, because I would consider this to be the heart and the roadmap of our transportation plan.
Okay.
the Heart has laid this out, and it's based on data, and it's based on ridership. So this is what I think we should be looking at as far as the base point for discussion, overlaying that with economic development and our goals here as a policy group, and that's where we should start going, at least a starting point. And then we can look at other alternative modes of transportation, see how they fit or they don't fit into this plan.
Okay. All right. Any feedback from any other members? Questions, comments? Thank y'all for the day. Appreciate it.
Still don't like those roundabouts.